Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines for yet another release ranking video. This time it is jcwings. jcwings are something of an anomaly in 400 scale. They are a huge model maker. They obviously make the geminijets models. They make their own brands in multiple scales. They are a substantial maker of models in China. But at the same time, they're a funny old company, aren't they? Because, well, it's the end of January, so we get the end of January releases. But of the releases that I'm going to talk about in this video, only half of them are even going to be seen this year. And even those are probably not likely to turn up till around April time, if Crown Vic on DAC is correct, which he probably is because he's got the connections with the distributor. So, these aren't really the January releases. They are, in fact, probably the April releases and possibly the April 2024 releases for half of them, which is super annoying and super weird and doesn't make any sense. Now, I assume that most people on here already know this information, so I'm kind of preaching to the choir. But at the same time, there may be some of you out there who don't realise this is the way jcwings operate. Whatever you do, do not pre-order any models from jcwings. In fact, don't pre-order models in general, because it's usually not worth the hassle, frankly. But certainly don't pre-order jcwings models. There are 13 releases that have been announced in this latest batch, and I have to say that they're not looking enormously exciting. I didn't even do the end of December video because I was so busy over the Christmas period, but really very little was missed. The releases were deeply ordinary, and to be honest, the releases from JC have been pretty ordinary for a while, and I'll talk a bit more about that perhaps at the end of the video. But for this video, we're going to go through the 13 releases that they have put out this month, of which it looks like 8 will be out and about in at least a vaguely sensible release time, and 5 are models that haven't even been, production hasn't been started for yet, and those will come out, like I say, who knows when. But I think if you were hoping for them this year, you'd probably be a little optimistic. Okay, before we get into the video, as always, subscribe to the channel, chuck a like on the video, and check out my other channels if you enjoy this kind of analysis and all the other things that I do: av history, mold sample reviews, reviews of the molds, comparing to each other, detailed ratings, and such. There's tons of material at yesterdaysairlines.com, and I post on Instagram at yesterdairlines, and I disseminate through Facebook too at yesterdairlines. So follow me on all those channels, because there are times when things get released on one and not on the other. So as I said, 13 releases this month, or 13 release announcements this month. Oh, it's annoying having to use that kind of language. And we'll look through the models that actually have photos of the releases for. They're the ones that you can be reasonably sure will turn up reasonably quickly. As I say, April sounds like the sort of timeline that people are talking about, which is odd. Why bother announcing models in January that you're going to actually end up putting out in April? Who knows? It doesn't make any sense the way jcwings operates. The first model out the bag, anyway, starting as always with the Airbuses, is an Air Transat A321neo, and it is somewhat ironic that jcwings announced this model at exactly the same time that ngmodels have announced it. It's ironic because it's clear as day that jcwings have had this model sitting around the warehouse for some time and just haven't got their backsides in gear and released it. And it's ironic because the jcwings A321neo is a poor mold. Because obviously, as I've said on pretty much every video that comes across on Gemini or JC using one of these A321s, it is just not, you know, it's just not good across the board, really. I mean, at least it's got the right wing on it, so there's plus points there. But the nose area, you know, sometimes it looks okay, sometimes it doesn't. And the engines, as always, I've said, they're enormous hoovers that drag along the ground. They look appalling. If you could at least put on a more reasonably sized engine, that would be a good start. And this model isn't even the first time they've released this. As I said in the NG video just recently, in 2019 they produced CGOIF. Now they're producing CGOIE. I think there's probably a good chance that both those releases were made at exactly the same time. And it literally has just been 4 years that this release has been sitting in the jcwings warehouse. I know that sounds insane, but I know that is what is happening with jcwings. They have an enormous warehouse full of old stock that they've produced and haven't kicked out yet, which is why you end up with this bizarre situation where they've got a new mold, but instead they're releasing old models on the old mold at the same time as they're putting out new mold releases. We'll see this later in the video with the 747. So that is why it's happening. It's because jcwings have this warehouse of old stock, effectively, which they haven't got around to releasing yet because I don't know why, to be honest. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I do have a little inkling why, some of it, but not all of it. So, anyway, this model, it's going to be the same as, or effectively the same, except the retro is slightly different as the new NG release. You'd have to be completely raving bonkers to buy this version over the NG. And anyone who listens to my videos and then goes out and buy the jcwings version over the NG one really needs to have their head read. So please don't do that. I mean, well, it's up to you. Hey, it's your ones, your money. You waste it the way you want, but it's not going to be at all competitive. So it's a pointless exercise, in my opinion. So what does that mean for a ranking? Well, it's not so bad that I'm going to put it in the scrap metal, but it's a clear gas guzzler, and I tend to nowadays put the JC A321, at least the Neos, in that gas guzzler category just because of that mold is so weak. And it has been a long time and JC have not shown any interest in changing the engines on it. I don't understand why that is. They've been quite good at making changes to molds in recent times and updating molds, but tone deaf when it comes to their A320 series, it seems. Okay, so that's the first model. The next up, we've got a Air Hong Kong A330 freighter. Once again, this is effectively a re-release of a model they've put out already because they've already done an Air Hong Kong A330-200 freighter. They did one in 2021. Yet again, I imagine this version has just been sitting around the warehouse. This time around, it's BLDP. Previously, it was BLDS. This one's a little more boring than the previous one. It's because the previous one at least said Air Hong Kong on it somewhere. This one's just the full DHL colours. It is fine, I guess, isn't it? But I really, even though they've got a decent hump for where the nose gear joins on this freighter mold, and arguably better than on the NG Panda mold, the undercarriage just ruins these for me. It's just too short, and especially the main gear, which I complained about previously on JC A330s. The undercarriage is too short across the board, and the main gear especially is too short. I mean, it's just damages the look of the model. So even though the models are going to be okay, it's not, you know, the sort of model I'm saying, oh wow, that actually looks like that would be really, really good. If you put on longer gear legs, I think it would look quite good, but it's just they look too short. They clearly look too short for an A330. So that does impact this. And the fact it's a re-release as well, or should I say it's the second of 2 releases spread across a substantial time period, as always with JC, limits its interest factor too. So this one's just going to go into workhorse. It's not interesting, really. And this is kind of the theme of this result set, or this release set, I should say. And you'll see that again when we move into the Boeings, which we're going to do now, because the next up is a YTO Express 737-300. Now, YTO Express is a small parcel carrier from China, so it's probably not the sort of airline you're overly interested in. This is the 7th YTO release, or at least the 7th announced YTO release, because lo and behold, there are 2 outstanding jcwings models, which who knows when they're going to get made. But it is the 4th 737-300 in YTO colours. Panda has made one before. Aeroclassics has made one before, both using the same mould. jcwings has made one before, the partner to this one, yet again. And again, both these models were made at exactly the same time. The box even indicates that they both were. And the difference here is that this one's got these tail bow markings on the rear of the fuselage, which is exactly the same as on the Aero Classics version that was released. Same rego, same livery. Inferior mold though, even though I don't hate the jcwings 737 Classics, it's an old mold, it's kind of showing its age, and it's certainly inferior to the Panda mold. So again, this model is not going to excite many people outside of China anyway. It's a sort of model I might be interested in, but really I'm just not kind of feeling it that much. It's a model I could plausibly buy, but it's just not high on my list, to be honest. And it doesn't help that the mold is, middling. So again, I think this is just going to be workhorse. It's effectively a re-release of the one they made previously, just with the added titles on the back, and the mold is okay, but not great. Next, we've got Astral Aviation. I don't know much about this cargo airline, but it looks like they're from Kenya. It looks like they wet lease most of their aircraft in from Air Atlanta Icelandic, and this aircraft, TFAMM, obviously is one of those because of the reg. It's a 747-400, but it's a converted passenger aircraft, so it's got the long upper deck hump. It's not the first Astral release. JC have made one previously. And that one was the standard freighter with the short hump. So this partners that, but clearly when you look at this, it's obvious that this is on the old jcwings 747 mold. Again, a perfectly ordinary mold, but one that dates pretty much back to the start of time, i.e. 1999. It's literally the same mold that was used for Geminijet's first ever release. Just been updated with new gear and aerials, but the fundamental issues of the mold still sit there. The biggest being that the engine pylon joint is a bit clumsy. It does have a seam, doesn't bother me that much, but it is there. And the nose and cockpit, they're okay, but they're not spectacular either. So it's a decent mold again, but it's an old mold that's been updated. Astral Aviation isn't really exciting me, to be honest, as a release. I guess it is at least slightly unique, but is it the sort of model that people were really crying out for? No, I don't think it is. And yeah, again, this has got workhorse written on it because it's on an old mold when they could have been using their newer mold, but obviously this model's been sitting around the warehouse for some time. And the airline is, it's not that exciting. So again, it's another workhorse model in my opinion. And this is the story of this release set, because the next model I also am thinking is very workhorsey. This one actually don't have a picture for the model, but from what I understand, it will be released soon. This is a 777-9 with the wings folded. The reg is N779XX. They've made a selection of these 777s already, including ones with the wing folded. In fact, I've got one, and it's perfectly good. It's actually very nice, albeit they don't print the window line particularly well. It's generally a bit high at the rear, so that's a minor problem with these. In fact, it's generally a bit high across the board actually, and that's a problem with these, but it's not a shocking problem, but it is a problem. Nonetheless, this aircraft looks like it's wearing the same livery as the previous release, which was N779XW. In fact, they've made N779XX as well, just with the wingtips down, not up. So it's effectively a partner for that previous release, which came out not very long ago. Is it even? Yeah, it was last year. So yeah, it's just a workhorse again. It's the same as a previous release and partners one. This is the fifth 777-9 they've made. They're all wearing the same scheme except the first one, which was wearing the kind of fantasy colours. Yeah, it's just kind of there. Yeah, who needs this when you've already got all those other previous options? It's just a pointless release, really, isn't it? So it's taken until our 6th release here in this set to find something which is actually unique and really rather interesting, and that at least is this Azul ATR 72. The reg of the aircraft is PPPTU. It's wearing these Tudo Azul colours. I don't really know what that relates to, but at least it's an attractive scheme. The aircraft is in this medium blue, and it's got this like a paper aeroplane logo going on the front of it. it looks nice, and Azul has already got an attractive scheme, and this special scheme looks nice, certainly nicer than all those Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck A320s that Phoenix have been putting out. So this should be good. The ATR mold is nice, and it does look like they've got the right size undercarriage on it, so that's good as well. The picture of the model looks nice. This is actually the first model here which I think I can really recommend as being something no one else is going to make, and something which will be finished really nicely. So I'm going to put this one up into High Flyer. A good release here. It is the third Azul ATR that JC have made, but at the same time the other two have completely different liveries. So nice. This is a good model. That leaves us with two releases in the soon-to-be-released category. And the next one up is a Flybe Embraer 170 GFBJE. It is in the standard Flybe scheme. Obviously not the recent Flybe, it's just gone bankrupt, but the one before. And yeah, again, it's difficult to get excited by this model because obviously it's not a unique model, one that they've never made before. They made a pair of Embraers for Wings 400, the UK store, recently. One of them was GFBJH. It's exactly the same as this aircraft from what I can tell. So this is again just another re-release fundamentally. Disappointing in that sense, but yeah, maybe there's a demand for it. I'd be surprised. They didn't seem to be selling out when I'd seen these releases for sale in the UK anyway, so yeah, again, it's just screaming workhorse. The mold's okay, it's not great, and it's a re-release. Which leaves us with one model which comes in the soon-to-be release pile. It's unique, nobody else is going to make it, but I still don't like it very much, which is odd. So it's a Japan Air Self-Defense Force Kawasaki C1. It's the second C1 release that jcwings have made, but I can't say that I'm loving this mold, which is disappointing because obviously nobody else is going to make a Kawasaki C1 in this scale. This one's wearing a special scheme, the 60th anniversary of the Iruma Air Base. Apparently it's quite a funky looking scheme. It's got a lot of colour for a military aircraft. It's got this orange and reds, like almost like tiger stripes, but they're not. Oh, it actually looks like a samurai face on the tail. It's actually pretty cool, but the problem is the mold's just not very good. When you look at the pictures of it, it just looks poorly finished, and it's mainly the undercarriage. It really looks cheap and plasticky and just poor. And I have to say the probe on the tail looks kind of chunky as well, and it doesn't look very metallic. And when you look at the real aircraft in pictures, you can see that it doesn't compare nicely to it, because the real aircraft, the Kawasaki, has got a really short undercarriage. You can barely see the gear legs at all, and yet this jcwings model release of it has got these obvious tall landing gear plasticky things that just don't look like they should be on the aircraft, and the wheels look too big. It just looks like a Hot Wheels model, which is super disappointing. Now I haven't had the mold close up, so I can't verify the rest of it, but the rest of the shape was kind of okay, but not great. I mean, that tail probe and the undercarriage are really turning me off, and in fact I'm going to put this mold down into Gas Guzzler because it just doesn't look good. It's a real shame because usually JC are good at producing smaller models and making them look good like the ATR, but this is sloppy, this mold, and yeah, disappointing. And that's the end of the releases that are going to be turning up in your own lifetime, and you can see that I'm not overly impressed by them at all. They just got the one High Flyer, a selection of workhorse tedium, and a couple of weak gas guzzlers. So that just leaves us 5 models to see whether JC can pull this out the bag. But obviously, you've got to take into account the fact that who knows when these models are going to show up. It's kind of crazy that they're even announcing them when they could easily be 2 years before they arrive on the scene. And that's one of the central problems with JC, and I'm kind of losing patience with the way it's run. It's just poor to do business like this and just leading people on with models and hoping you'll get their pre-order. It's rubbish. But let's look through those models anyway. To be honest, they're not the sort of models that you should be waiting around for very long for anyway, on the whole. The first one up is an ITA Airways A321. It's got this special scheme on it. I think it's called the FG region, the Friuli Venezia Giulia. I can't speak Italian. Doesn't matter. Basically, it looks pretty cool. It's like you've got two aircraft jammed together because the front half of the aircraft is in the ITA blue and the back half isn't. And the scheme looks nice. But obviously, you've got to bear in mind when you're thinking about the representation of this is that firstly, Gemini just produced an ITA A319 and got the colour wrong. And it was JC making that model for them, so they're unlikely to get the blue right here. And this is a CFM powered A320, which means that the engines are going to be oversized on an A320 which already is inferior to the Panda A320, to the Aviation 400 A320, to the NG A320. So, do we think that somebody else is going to make this model before JC releases it? I think almost 100% that they will, and I think it's likely to be NG models, because this is just the sort of model that they're releasing nowadays. So I would be very surprised if they didn't produce this model in the next few months, whereas JC are going to produce this in the next few years. There's no competition. The mold is just, mediocre or ordinary. It's just pointless to be sitting here pretending that this model should be, a model you should be waiting for. Having said that, it's not a complete stinker. So I've got some of these JC A320s with the CFM engines, and they are too large, but they don't look awful. So, yeah, again, it clearly isn't going to be a great model, but I don't think it's as bad that it should be gas guzzler. It's just a workhorse model because I know, at least I think I know, that someone else is going to release it better, and the weight is going to be crippling anyway, so it's annoying. And next up, you've got a pair of A321s, Neos, so that means they're going to stink straight away. And obviously, again, there's no way that you should be waiting for these models, especially because one of them has been announced by NG already, and that's the Geminijets Airlines A321 Neo B32CU. So there's no reason to be waiting around for that model. jcwings have made it too, I think. And the other one is Geminijets Airlines. I'm sure I'm not saying it properly. I never do. This one's wearing quite a nice scheme, this blessed land livery. The reg is B32CJ. But I'm going to ignore the fact it's wearing a nice scheme and no one else has made it yet because the jcwings A321 Neo stinks. So what's the point in talking about it? And it's going to be ages before it's released. Just a waste of time. So, yeah, these are just going to go straight into gas guzzler, the pair of them. They're both going to be mediocre models. Two models left. And the next one is another colourful but likely to be mediocre release. This one's for T-Way Air of South Korea. I complained a bit about South Korean airlines just in the recent NG video. At least T-Way Air is not named after just some city in South Korea, but this combines a boring airline with Pokemon. Pokemon, they're everywhere. I actually, for a while, didn't hate Pokemon when I had a young child. I thought, Pokemon, you play the game with him and that's cool. But Pokemon, they are getting on my nerves now. They're on too many aircraft. The aircraft actually looks okay, to be fair. But ignoring the fact it's covered in Pokemon and nobody else has made a T-Way Air 737 except for Phoenix on their equally dire molds, the JC mold isn't very good. And again, it's another mold just like A320 they should just throw away. Stop making models on it. It's a waste of time. Do something else or get a better next generation 737. Just admit that you've lost this market share because your mold is so out of date and not very good. So, yeah, I'm going to put this one in. It's a gas guzzler as well because it's just such an ordinary, worse than ordinary mold. And, Pokemon on a boring Korean airline. No, not doing it for me. So that means that in this entire set of 13 models, 12 I've looked at, only one has got above workhorse. And I'm being probably reasonably charitable about some of those workhorses not being gas guzzlers, to be fair. So the last model up is a 777 Interactive Series 200 freighter. So at least we're going to be using that cool new interactive mold which JC have produced, which looks really nice. I haven't actually been able to buy any yet because the ones I'm interested in, like this one, aren't going to be released for ages. This one is in the colours of China Postal Airlines. It does fit my collection criteria. The mould is going to be good. The China Postal livery is actually quite nice. And yeah, I'm quite excited by this. But a few months ago, they announced Central Airlines of China. That will also be interactive. And who knows when these models are going to get released. It's super frustrating. Super frustrating. But it will be good when it arrives, whenever that is. So I'm going to put this one up into High Flyer, but with obviously the proviso that it's annoying that I've got no idea when the model's going to come out, and I'm going to sit there keeping an eye out for jcwings to do the most basic administration and tell people, which they don't. They release the bloody models eventually and don't tell anyone they've released them, like 2 years after that you were interested in the model. I mean, it's a ludicrous way to do business. It's embarrassingly rubbish. I can't believe that they don't even tell you when the models come out, and you just have to hope that you come across them. So that's, really annoying. But this should be a good model. So I'll put this one up into Supersonic. Sorry, actually I think I said High Flight before, but I'll put this one into Supersonic because this one is actually a model that I'm really keen to get. But in 2 years' time, will I be keen to get it still? Yeah, I don't know. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here and put this one up into Supersonic. So we end on a high, kind of, but still with a moan. I'm trying to be a bit more critical this year of the manufacturers and what they're producing because, a lot of this stuff is just disappointing. A lot of the way they're running their businesses is disappointing. And jcwings is probably my biggest disappointment at the moment. It did look for some time like jcwings were really pulling their socks up. They started producing really good molds, their 777s, their 787s, that new 747-400 that you probably forgotten existed because they never use it, and even when they do use it, you seemingly can't find the releases because they released to like nowhere. They were producing some good models, and they've got lots of stuff on the way, in theory, like the A310, which allegedly is supposed to be turning up at some point, but who knows when. Like the Antonov 24, which we've heard about, these kind of molds which are allegedly going to be out there. There's even a TO204. I think everyone's forgotten about that. But where are these things? Why are JC so incredibly slow? They just seemingly don't care, or they're just very bad. I think a lot of it is related to the fact that they've got this agreement with geminijets. I know for a fact that Gemini have a lot of control over what JC are releasing, so I know there's a mountain of jcwings releases sitting in that warehouse, some of which they can't release because Gemini won't let them. That doesn't necessarily mean they're good releases, but they are there. And there's a huge backlog, as you can see, of models that were released or made years ago, which is sitting in that factory or fit in that warehouse waiting to get released. And it takes 2 or 3 years, and they trickle them out like they have here. Because this Air Transat, this DHL, this YTO, and the Astral Aviation, I know that all of those models have been sitting in that warehouse now for at least more than a year, waiting to be dribbled out like this. And as in the case of the Air Transat A321, all they've done is shoot themselves in the foot, because in the meantime someone else has come along, produced a much better A321, and lo and behold produced exactly the same model, which is going to be superior. So why would you buy that one? It's a crazy way to run a business. It's a funny way to announce things. And then, like I said, when they do finally get the models out, they don't even tell you about them. So these future release models, you probably will miss them when they eventually get out. So disappointing. JC are disappointing. They've had a couple of nice looking releases, but like the IL-86. But where is that? I mean, that was 2 or 3 months ago that they announced it. It was in November maybe. And where is it? Where is it? Or maybe it was December. I can't remember. Where is it though? It's who knows when it's going to show up. It's not a good way to run a company. It's not a good way to work with people buying the models. And this release set is largely rubbish. Mediocrity, mediocre molds, mediocre releases that you've seen before, or you may never see, because who knows when they're going to be released. I'd like to think things will change for JC. I'm pretty sure they're not going to, at least until they can unshackle themselves from Gemini. It's just the way it is. So you've got to accept it. I'll keep on looking at the models. I still do buy a decent number of jcwings releases, but I can't say that on this month's set anything is interesting me except that China Postal 777, and like I say, are going to be 46 or something by the time it comes out, as opposed to the 44 I am now, and that's completely unacceptable, that kind of weight. Anyway, guys, sorry about the moaning on this one, but this is a poor set of releases, and JC are not impressing at the moment. They need to pull their socks up and change the way they're doing business, in my opinion. That's it for now. I'll see you next time at Yesterday's Airlines. Until then, goodbye.